Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are back into the Initiates of the Flame. We will be reading and discussing. Uh, I got a good question yesterday on the first video in this, and it was, how do you identify the actual subtle fields? And I'm actually hoping that there is a chance to talk about that in this particular series. That's why I chose the Initiates of the Flame, but I haven't read the Initiates of the Flame all the way through. Um, so far, we have talked about manipulating the subtle energies. If we don't get to it in this series, it will be in this video, which I am putting together, trying to work out all of the things and get the mechanics correct, because this will be an all-inclusive subtle field video. So if it's not involved in this, it will be in that, and there are some discussion on it in the Infinite Integrations and the Hermes Trismegistus videos. So you could probably check there for some of it, but I don't know that I have actually talked about the identifying of. So hopefully it comes out as we're going through this. With that being said, we will be reading chapter 3 and 4, probably 5 as well, of the Initiates of the Flame. Let's dive in. This is chapter 3, The Mystery of the Alchemist. There are very few occult students today who have not heard of the alchemist, but there are very few who know anything about the strange men who lived during the Middle Ages and concealed under chemical symbolism the history of the soul. At a time when to express a religious thought was to court annihilation at the stake or wheel, they labored silently in underground caves and cellars to learn the mysteries of nature, which the religious opinions of their day denied them the privilege of doing. Let us picture the alchemist of old deep in the study of natural lore. We find him among the test tubes and retorts of his hidden laboratory. Around him are massive tomes and books by ancient writers. He is a student of nature's mystery and has devoted years, lives maybe, to the work he loves. His hair has long since grayed with age. By the light of his little lamp he reads, slowly and with difficulty, the strange symbols on the pages before him. His mind is centered upon one thing, and that is the finding of the philosopher's stone. With all of the chemicals at his command, their various combinations thoroughly understood, he is laboring with his furnace and his burners to make of the base metals the philosopher's gold. At last he finds the key and gives to the world the secret of the philosopher's gold and the immortal stone. Salt, sulfur, and mercury are the answers to his problem. From them he makes the philosopher's stone, and from them he extracts the elixir of life. With the power that they give him, he transmutes the base metals into gold. The world laughs at him, but he goes on in silence, really doing the things the world believes impossible. After many years of labor, he takes his little lamp and silently slips away into the great unknown. No one knows what he has done or the discoveries that he has made, but he, with his little lamp, still explores the mysteries of the universe. As the close of the 15th century clouded him with mystery, so the dawn of the 20th century is crowning him with the glory of his just reward. For the world is beginning to realize the truth he knew, and to marvel at the understanding which his years of labor had earned for him. Man has been an alchemist from the time when he first raised himself, and with the powers long latent, pronounced himself as human. Experiences are the chemicals of life which the philosopher is experimenting with. Nature is the great book whose secrets he seeks to understand through her own wondrous symbolism. His own spiritual flame is the lamp by which he reads, and without this the printed pages mean nothing to him. His own body is the furnace in which he prepares the philosopher's stone. His senses and organs are the test tubes, and incentive is the flame from the burner. Salt, sulfur, and mercury are the chemicals of his craft. According to the ancient philosophers, salt was of the earth, earthy. Sulfur was a fire which was spirit, while mercury was nothing, only a messenger like the winged Hermes of the Greeks. His color is purple, which is the blending of the red and blue, the blue of the spirit and the red of the body. The alchemist realizes that he himself is the philosopher's stone, and that this stone is made diamond-like when the salt and the sulfur, or the spirit and the body, are united through Mercury, the link of mind. Man is the incarnated principle of mind, as the animal is of emotion. He stands with one foot on the heavens and the other on the earth. His higher being is lifted to the celestial spheres, but the lower man ties him to matter. Now, the philosopher, building his sacred stone, is doing so by harmonizing his spirit and his body. The result is the philosopher's stone. The hard knocks of life chip it away and facet it until it reflects light from a million different angles. This picture, known to all Masons, is that of the soul. It is the Star of Bethlehem, which heralds the coming of the Christ within. The two clasped hands are the spirit and body united in the marriage of the Lamb. It is from the union of the higher with the lower that the Christ is born. The elixir of life is once again the spirit, fire, or rather the fuel which nourishes that fire, and the turning of the base metal into gold is accomplished when he transmutes the lower man into spiritual gold. This he studies by study and love. Thus he is building within himself the lost panacea for the world's woe. The turning of the base metal into gold can be called a literal fact, as the same chemical combination which spiritually produces gold will also do this physically. It is a known fact that many of the ancient alchemists really did create the precious metal out of lead, alloy, etc., but it was upon the principle that all things contain some part of everything else. In other words, every grain of sand or drop of water has, in some proportion, every element of the universe therein. Therefore, the alchemist did not try to make something from nothing, but rather to extract and build that which already was. And this, the student knows, is the only possible course of procedure. Man can create nothing from nothing, but he does contain within, in potential energy, all things. And like the alchemist with his metals, he is simply working with that which he already has. The living philosopher's stone is a very beautiful thing. Indeed, like the fire opal, it shines with a million different lights, changing with the mood of the wearer. The transmuting process, whereby the spiritual fire passing through the furnace of purification radiates from the body, and the soul body of gold and blue, is a very beautiful one. The marriage of the sun and moon. This takes place in man when the heart and mind are joined in eternal union. It occurs when the positive and negative poles within are united, and from that union is made the philosopher's stone. The Masons have among their symbols that of a five-pointed star with two clasped hands within it. We just saw the illustration. And in that we have the mystery of the philosopher's stone. The clasped hands represent the united man in which the higher and the lower are working for their mutual betterment by a cooperative rather than a competitive system. The five-pointed star is the soul body, born of this cooperation. It is the living philosopher's stone, more precious than all the jewels of earth. From it pour the rivers of life spoken of in the Bible. It is the star of the morning that heralds the dawn of mastery, and is the reward that comes to those who follow in the footsteps of the ancient alchemist. It is well for the student to realize that the alchemy of life produces in natural sequence all of the states of progression which are explained in the writings of the alchemist until, finally, the sun and the moon are united as described in the Hermetic marriage, which is, in truth, the marriage of the body and the spirit for the mutual development of each other. We are the alchemists who, centuries ago, carried on in secret our studies of the soul, and we still have the same opportunity that we had then. Even more than then, for now we can state our opinions with little danger of personal injury. The modern alchemist thus has an opportunity that his ancient brother never had. On a busy street corner he daily sees nature's experiments carried on. He sees the mixing of metals, and from the everyday book of life, through the power of analogy, he may study divinity. Through experience and often suffering, the steel of his spirit is tempered by the flame of life, as the moon in the zodiac touches off like a fuse the happenings of life. So his own desires and wishes touch off the powers of his soul, and the experiences may be transmuted into soul qualities when he has developed the eye which enables him to read the simplest of all books, everyday life. The pillars of the temple, Boaz and Jochin. These pillars symbolize the heart and mind, the positive and negative poles of life. Those who would enter the temple must pass between the pillars. Every extreme is dangerous. It is the point between all poles that is safe to stand upon. You cannot enter the temple by the development of either the heart or mind alone, but only by the equal development of both. The alchemist of today is not hidden in caves and cellars studying alone, but as he goes on with his work it is seen that walls are built around him, and while he is in the world, like the master of old, he is not of it. And he goes further in his work, the light of other people's advice and outside help grows weaker and weaker, until finally he stands alone in darkness. And then comes the time that he must use his own lamp, and the various experiments which he has carried on must be his guide. He must take the elixir of life which he has developed and fill it with the lamp of his spiritual consciousness, and holding that above his head, walk into the great unknown, where, if he has been a good and faithful servant, he will learn of the alchemy of divinity. Where now test tubes and bottles are his implements, then worlds and globes he will study, and as a silent watcher will learn from that divine one who is the great alchemist of all the universe, the greatest alchemy of all, the creation of life, the maintenance of form, and the building of worlds. The serpent. This is the serpent crown of the ancient gods. It shows that the two paths or parts of the spirit fire have been united. This crown is the symbol of mastery, and when the union takes place within the student, when life forces are lifted to the brain. Okay, so there is a significant amount to talk about here, and I'm going to transition just for a second while I scroll back up to the top, and we're going to talk about this from the top to the bottom because there was a good bit in here. It talks about the three elements, right? You have, I want to get it right, the philosopher's stone. They said sulfur, salt, and mercury are the three that they use. And salt is the earth, flesh suit, right? The sulfur is the fire, and that is the becoming, that is the Holy Spirit, that is the part that makes future happen. And then you have the mercury, which is nothing. It is the soul. It is the part that makes the decisions. That is what they're telling you here, right? It is the same thing. It is the Trinity that I have been talking about through all of these books. It's the same thing. You have to take control of those things, right? We are going to talk about the recognition real quick because part of it is, let me get this up because this is an important illustration right here, and there is a reason. Life is balance, and that is what this is showing right here. This is the symbolization of the pillars built in the Temple of Solomon, right? Now, this is not a good and accurate representation because there's no pomegranates and the filials around the top aren't on these particular illustrations, but this is just to show you the positive and the negative, the good and the bad, so to speak, the sins and the virtues. And your life is not meant to touch either one of those poles, and whichever one it happens to be, positive and negative. Your life is meant to ride in between those. You are meant to find the balance. You're supposed to be dead center for all of it, right? Not abstaining from everything and not overindulging in everything, but instead finding the balance within yourself that is the harmony that is. There is another symbolism in here with these because there are two distinct flows of energy that do happen. And before we can really talk about it, we're gonna have to talk about the recognizing. And this is a hard one for me because it's not an easy thing to describe to someone else. In the process of prayer, fasting, and meditation, you will at some point come to the point where you have emptied your mind. It's going to take discipline. There is procedures in place that we're not going to detail in here, but focusing on your breaths, counting things, those are to distract you from your own thoughts. When you do the deep breathing, the actual physical moving of the air is doing something. It is circulating the energy through you without you even really understanding how that happens. But it is also preparing you to not think your thoughts, right? If you're concentrating only on breathe in for 2 seconds and hold, and then breathe out for 2 seconds and hold, right? If you're only concentrating on those things, then what happened during your day is not kicking around up here. Once you have reached the part where that's not kicking around up here and you are no longer concentrating on the breath, you have faded that part away and you're in the nothing. It is a moment of peace and clarity. You will know what I'm talking about, and until you experience it, you haven't made it there yet. In that, you can feel your energy move. Now, it takes practice to identify. The way that I did it was through the pulse, right? I'm in my meditative state and I can feel my blood moving, right? You take and you trace it, I guess is the best way. You can feel it move out, you can feel it move in, you can feel the rhythm of your heart beating in the becoming. If you can get the awareness of the out and the back in, and then you can get into the source of that, then you can start to awaken how you the awareness of the subtle energy, right? That is one of the ways to identify the subtle energy is through your pulse. It is through your breathing. There's several other flexes of the chakras that you can do, but until you're aware of the energy, it's like a 50-50 game. Like you can squeeze and do all you want, but until you understand how the energy actually moves, it doesn't make sense. Right? You do have access to 2 points of energy, right? There's really kind of three, which we'll talk about, but you have the positive and the negative. Negative is generally the masculine destructive because it is the part that moves forward. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but if you're aware of electricity, it moves from negative to positive. It doesn't move from positive to negative. The force of creation is the negative, and the force of destruction is the positive because it is the point of completion. Regardless of how you think of it, one of them you can classify as black and one of them as white. Now, for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, it is like this. The black one comes from the bottom and the white one comes from the top. And I use that when I am doing my daily meditations to cleanse myself. I take the energy from the bottom and I meet it with the one on the top in the chakra, right? I heal with the dark one. I cleanse with the light one, and then I align how it needs to go according to this right here. We talked about that yesterday. Like the one moves this way and one moves that way, and you have to intentionally move those things to make it work. This is a multi-layered representation is what I'm trying to get to here, right? It is you are supposed to be between the pillars, but the pillars are also the balancing point, right? So when you raise the healing energy from the bottom and the cleansing energy from the top and you marry them in the chakra and energize your chakra and align it in the way that it needs to go, some people are going to be able to visualize. I can't, right? I have aphantasia. I'm working on trying to break whatever that is, but it hasn't happened yet. So I can't visualize, well, this one's red and this one's orange and this one's yellow and this one's green and this one's blue, right? I can't do that in that manner. So I say it, I try to conceptualize it, but I don't really see it. You might see it. Now, the subtle field I see with my eyes open, and it is the mixture of these two, right? It is the cleansing or the healing and the cleansing energy mixed together. It is not the isolation of the white or the black. It is the mixing and intermingling without becoming the other. So it is like a static field. It is like not gray, but black and white together equally separately. That's the best way that I can explain the cleanse, right? It talks in here about the colors, and if you're seeing colors, that means that there is a misalignment. Right? If your divine chakra is showing you red, you're misaligned in your base. If it's showing you yellow, you're misaligned in your solar plexus. If it's showing you indigo, it's at the crown. Or it's at the third eye. Violet's at the crown. But anyway, you can use that to help figure out what you need to align within yourself. You can see that in other people. It is not recommended to do anything if you don't know what you're doing, for one, or if you do not have consent, for two. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you are not there yet, and you don't even need to try. the recognition of the one, of the subtle field, of the energy. I'm still working out how to express that completely, right? I hope that I've given a little bit here that can help you start, because I'm still working out that part. Like, it's been a long time since I did my recognition, so it's hard for me to express that. I have been working with the fields for a long time, so I can describe the working of the field better than I can the identification of the field. That's all we needed to cover on this part. And then finally, the servant here does tie back into this, because these two move, right? Let's go ahead and pop this up, and you can barely make it out, but this is your red chakra, right? The base, the sacral, the solar plexus, and it moves on up. You're not going to be able to see all of them. But you can see I have drawn around it a black line. What you really can't see is that also drawn around it coming down is a green line, right? I don't have a white marker on for my white board, but the green is symbolizing the white here, and the black is symbolizing the black. And these things move in a helical pattern through your spinal cord, right? So this energy is sinuous. That is why they give you the snake imagery. That is why the snake imagery has been shown to be bad in several control systems, because this energy is the part that helps you to become enlightened. This is the thing that you are releasing, but it does equally come from the top and the bottom, and people are severely misunderstanding that. They are only using half of it, and that is a problem. That's why you have all the wrong effects, right? They are using the one that comes from the base, and that is, for me, the black one, right? That's what we talked about. But they're not pulling in the divine, right? They're not trying to take in through their crown the divine. They're pulling up from their base the divine in that manner, because it is the same energy. Now, the third point I was talking about, that's the heart. The heart, the crown, and the base are where you are energetically manipulated, right? You receive information at the top and the bottom, and you really kind of give it out here. The heart feeds the divine aura through the other stacks. So if you're not aligned, where you have your earthly stuff from the solar plexus down and your divine stuff from the throat up in alignment, then it's not going to come right in your heart, right? It's not going to exude in the right manner, and that's when you're going to see the colors in the wrong way, and you're going to see all of those things. The snake pattern is a visualization technique, right? It helps. It does. When I started doing my breathing exercises, the way that I do them is I breathe in through the nose, and I conceptualize, because I can't really visualize, but it goes up and down, like around my crown, down through my throat in a Ouroboros fashion, like an 8, and then down around to my base, back around the backside, and then out of my throat. So it makes like this. That's how I do my breathing. I conceptualize my breathing in that manner. Well, you do the same thing for the energy through the stack, right? You take the black and you move it in a sinuous fashion around the chakras, because it is feeding them. But you got to do the same coming down too. You have to catch that, that cleansing energy and weave them around your chakras too. I do that in my meditative walks every single day, right? I don't have to sit and breathe and do all of those things. I can recognize the subtle field so I can manipulate it on my own. You might have to, for a while, be deep in meditation before you can do anything with it. That is not unusual. Take your progress as it comes. Don't try to force things because forcing things causes negative repercussions, and you really do not want that to happen. And I just realized that I did not have y'all seeing the actual representation there. So, anyway, now we're going to dive into Chapter 4 The Egyptian Initiate. Many ages have elapsed since the Egyptian priest king passed through the pillars of Thebes. Ages before the sinking of Atlantis, thousands of years before the Christian era, Egypt was a land of great truths. The hand of the Great White Brotherhood was held out to the empire of the Nile, and the ancient pyramid passages resounded with the chants of the initiates. It was then that the pharaoh, now called half human, half divine, reigned in ancient Egypt. Pharaoh is the Egyptian word for king. Many of the later pharaohs were degenerate and of little account. It is only the early pharaohs we now list among the priest kings. The Masonic apron. In the triangle we see spirit descending into the square of matter. Let us so purify matter that spirit may shine through it and make us lights to guide the footsteps of humanity. Try to picture for a moment the great hall of Luxor. Its inscriptive columns holding up domes of solid granite, each column carved with the histories of the gods. There, at the upper end of the chamber, sat the Pharaoh of the Nile in his robes of state. Around him his counselors, chief among them the priest of the temple. An imposing spectacle it was, the gigantic frame of the later Atlantean, robed in gold and priceless jewels. On his head the crown of the north and south, the double empire of the ancient. On his forehead the coiled serpent of the initiate, the serpent which was raised in the wilderness, that all who looked upon it might live. That sleeping serpent, power in man, which coiled head downward around the tree of life, drove him from the garden of the Lord, but which raised upon the cross became the symbol of the Christ. The Pharaoh was an initiate of Scorpio, and the serpent is the transmuted Scorpio energy, which, working upwards in the regenerated individual, is called the Kundalini. The serpent was the sign of initiation. It meant that within him the serpent had been raised, for the true Pharaoh was a priest of God, as well as a master of men. There he sat upon the cube altar throne, indicating his mastery over the four elements of his physical body, a judge of the living and of the dead, who, in spite of all his power and glory, having about him the grandeur of the world's greatest empire, still bowed in humble supplication to the will of the gods. In his hands he carries the triple scepter of the Nile, the shepherd's crook, the Anubis-headed staff, and the flail or whip. These were the symbols of his work. They represented the powers which he had mastered. With the whip he had subjugated his physical body. With the shepherd's crook he was the guardian and keeper of his emotional body. And with the Anubis-headed staff he was the master of his mind and worthy to wield the powers of government over others, because, first of all, he obeyed the laws himself. The scepters of Egypt. These are the three bodies that are the tools which we are to build our temple. When they are mastered, they are living proof of our right of kingship. With all of his robes of state, and with the scarab upon his breast, and with the all-seeing eye above his throne, there was still nothing as precious or as sacred to the ancient Egyptian priest-king as the triangular girdle or apron which was the symbol of his initiation. The apron of the ancient Egyptian carried with it the same symbolism as the Masonic apron of today. It symbolized the purification of the bodies, when the seat of the lower emotions, Scorpio, was covered by the white sheepskin of purification. This symbol of his purification was the most precious belonging of the ancient Pharaoh, and this plain insignia, worn by many others below him in rank and dignity, but equal to him in spiritual purification, was the most precious of all things to the priest king. There he sat, written upon him in the words of the initiate, the symbols of his purification and mastery, a wise king of a wise people. And it was through these priest kings that the divine worked, for they were of the order of the Melchizedek. Through them was formed that doctrine which degeneracy has not been able to entirely obliterate, which we know as the divine right of kings. Divine because through spirituality and growth God was able to manifest through them. They were conscious instruments in the hands of a ready writer, willing and proud to do the work of those with whom, through knowledge and truth, they had attuned themselves. The sacred scarab. In this form, the ancient Egyptians worshipped Khepera, the rising sun, and the sacred scarab was buried with the dead as a symbol of resurrection. For as the sun rises from the darkness of night, so the divine spirit rises from the body that is no more. The life is eternal. But the time came, as in all nations, when selfishness and egotism entered the heart of the king and people alike, and slowly the hand from the great white brotherhood that fed ancient Egypt was withdrawn, and the powers of darkness transformed the land of glory into one of ruins, and the names of mighty kings were buried beneath the oblivion of degeneracy. Mighty cataclysms shook the world, and out of the land of darkness the great white brotherhood carried the chosen people into the promised land. Egypt, the land of glory, disintegrated into dust. The great temples of the pharaohs are in ruins, and the temples of Isis are but broken heaps of sandstone. But what of the priest kings who labored there in the days of its glory? They are still with us, for those who were leaders before are leaders now, if they have continued to walk the path. Although his scepter is gone and his priestly vestments have molded away, the priest king still walks the earth with the dignity and power and the childish simplicity that before made him great. He no longer wears the robes of his order. Although he bears no credentials, he is as much a priest king now as then, for he still bears the true insignia of his rank. The coiled serpent has given place to knowledge and love. The hand that bestowed the riches of the past does little acts of kindness now. Although he no longer carries the scepters of self-mastery, still he manifests that mastery in his daily life. Although the altar fires within the temple at Karnak have long been dead, the true fire within himself still burns. And before that, he still bows as he bowed in the days of Egypt's glory. Although the priest no longer is his counselor, and the wise ones of his country no longer aid him in governmental problems, still he is never alone, for the priest in white and the counselors in blue still march with him and whisper words of strength when he needs them. Have you seen people that somehow you liked, regardless of appearances? Have you seen other charming people whom you hated in spite of their charms? Have you seen learned people who were fools or impressed you as such, or people who knew little and yet you felt were wise? Those are the insignia of rank, which the loss of title or position cannot destroy. Kings, with or without crowns, they were, not puppets dressed in tawdry tinsel, and they still are kings and will be to the end of time. And they still manifest their rank not by their superiority and their high-headedness, but by the soul qualities which they radiate from themselves. The purity of their lives still radiates outward from those who wore the apron of the initiate. For while that triangular apron with its serpent drawn upon it has long since rotted away, still the spiritual counterpart of that symbol radiates in their daily lives, proving beyond all dispute that they were priest kings and are today. We find them in every walk of life, in high places and down in the mire of life. But wherever we find them, they are still the mouthpieces of the gods, and Through them comes the promise to all who strive. They are kings, not of the earth, but of heaven. And in the life of our own Master, we find one who joined himself to those who served, and was a true king, even when his only crown was a wreath of thorns. Still, in the pyramids of Giza, the initiations continue. Still, the initiate receives the insignia of his rank. Before that fire within himself he makes his vows, and upon the burning altar of his own higher being he lays his crown and scepter, his robes and his diamonds, his hates and his fears, and sanctifies his life as a priest king, and swears to serve none but his own higher self, the God within. His robes are his soul body, and his crown is his life, and in the streets of life he is enthroned. The dusky towers and factory chimneys around him fade into the templed pillars of Luxor, and with a lunch pail on his arm, his face brown with honest dirt, he is as much a king as when the crown of the double Nile rested upon his brow, and the priest of the temple made him one with his God and his fellow man. And we have an illustration of the candle, and we have an illustration of the Ark of the Covenant. This is the priest before the Ark of the Covenant, and the Spirit over the mercy seat. If you would like to know more about that, I have a whole video, but we're apparently going to be talking about it in just a second. So let's talk about the symbology, right? There are a lot of tools out there. There are a lot of things that you can use to do a lot of things, right? I have this. This is a balance stone, right? Y'all can see it. And then I have this. This is also a balance stone, and I use these in my meditations, right? But these have no power in and of themselves. They are just useful tools to help change vibrations. I have on this shelf right here, I have several of them. They absorb energy. They reflect energy. They are tools. You can use them. They are not anything in and of themselves. So if you just set it there, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Now, you can set it there with an intention, and that intention will do things for a limited amount of time. That is kind of how enchantment works. But it's a tool. The same thing is true of the various vestments that have been used throughout all of history, up to and including the Masonic apron. It is a symbol, right? It is an outward symbol of an inward thing. Having that does not make you pure. You can get that through deception. It is probably a little bit hard to do, but you can do it, right? It is a possibility at least. And so it's not the tool, right? It is to help you to identify people who you can talk to, help you to see other people who have been through the same process that you have. Now, there's something mentioned in here, and I've only mentioned this a time or two before, but the Order of Melchizedek, that's a real thing. Now, you will absolutely think that I'm crazy, but I am initiated. I'm not saying I'm a master, but I am definitely in the order. As far as I know, I'm the only one. Now, I have not met anyone else, but there is something that was given to me at that point that will allow me to identify someone else. It's the same with the apron. It's the same with the various vestments that the Catholic Church uses, that the Episcopalian Church uses, that the Mohammedan Church uses. All of these people use things to help you identify things that you understand. So when we see, I'm going to go back up to it. When we see the symbology here, right, it's saying the Spirit descending into the square of matter. Let us so purify ourselves so that the light shines through. Now, this is the 3 into 1, right? This is the Trinity. You have the earth, you have the sulfur and the salt. Or you have the salt, the sulfur, and the mercury. That's what's being shown here. The salt, the flesh suit, is the outer square. Then you have the sulfur, or you have the spirit, which is the triangle coming down. And the fire here is being represented, it's the sulfur, and it's being represented by the little duty dad right here in the middle of it. Again, It's symbology. It's to help you to be able to recognize things. The same is true with the scarab and with these implements, right? This is just clues if you have been initiated into them. And they gave you a brief description of what these are supposed to represent so that now you're initiated. It's not a full initiation, right? You're not taking part in some ritual. God knows I am not performing a ritual right now. But it is something that they can identify with. The same is true with the scarab, right? It is a symbol. It doesn't actually represent rebirth unless you put that power into it. All of these tools do nothing by themselves. I have a wand, I have these, I have other tools, but they are tools. They are nothing by themselves and they have no power. So that is something that you need to be paying attention to. Oh, a lot of this, however, I don't know that there is historical record for, right? Like the initiation processes that the Masons use and claim come from Egypt. I don't know that they have any actual historical reason to believe that. If so, y'all let me know down below and we will do this for that. But as far as I know, that's not part of the thing. Oh, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that I needed to talk about in this though. The priest king is kind of talking about the journey, right? Let's talk about that, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this one up on that because we could dive into the Ark of the Covenant, but that's probably going to be best to save for another one. If you would like a preview of where I stand on that, I have a Bible study for that. The priest king and the knowing the things coming back, right? I have a slightly different conception of life. Right? I think that God is the one. He is all things. He is me. He is you. He is the space between me and you, and he is the space between me and you. He is all things you can put your hands on and everything that you cannot put your hands on at the same time. We are direct expressions of his will, in that he gives us an individualized piece to navigate the flesh suit, and he uses his spirit to help us to do that. That individualized piece of you made the choice to come here, right? You were given free will. Now, how the mechanics of that work, I cannot tell you until we get there. I have my estimation of it. You can have your estimation of it, whatever. But I believe that we were collectively a part of God, and that as part of the individualization process, we were given choices of lessons to learn while we were here. There are things that I am meant to teach you and you are meant to teach me, and that is true for every single interaction that you ever have in your entire life. It has been planned out. It has been put into motion. Now, some of those things are great. You might find your true love. You may live wonderfully and happily for 80 years, right? You may have a long, wonderful, productive life with your true love. That may be part of your destiny. That may be part of what you two have agreed upon. Or you may have agreed to meet your true love and not be with them. That is a possibility. You may have agreed to be tempted by all of these other people before you meet your true love. There's all these possibilities, and not all of them become actualities. Sometimes me and this guy over here have said, okay, if this circumstance comes into being, then you're going to teach me this and I'm going to teach you that. And then that circumstance never comes into being. And then sometimes it is unavoidable that this particular part of your lesson will have to be learned. Most of the times those are really tough. It's grief. It is physical pain. It is emotional turmoil. Those are things that are designed to help you become a better you. You agreed to them before you got here. And so these soul contracts is what I call it, is what we make to come here and learn things. I don't believe that this is the only go around ever. Now, for me, in my estimation, it was probably going to be the only one in this particular meat suit, but that doesn't mean I don't get a different meat suit on a different trip. It doesn't mean that my consciousness is not living right now in a different meat suit on this planet. That is a possibility. We may meet, we may never meet. Those are possibilities. All of these things are part of the incarnation process. There are people who will tell you that we live on a prison planet, that this is a construct designed to hold you back and to keep you from achieving. I take the opposite view of that. I believe that it's probably some kind of a construct, but it's so that you can learn and grow and achieve the things that you want to. That it is not a negative experience unless you are intent upon it. And that you can, in fact, change your stuff, like your circumstances. I believe that a lot of that has to do with the mental alchemy that is being talked about, right? We have talked in Hermes Trismegistus several times about the mental alchemy, about riding the pendulum up but not riding it back down, about taking your circumstances and making them better. What they're talking about here in the Priest King is that they are trying to make you recognize within yourself the possibility that your spirit is here for an experience and that you might be the Priest King. You don't have to be. You could be here on your first go round. You could be here on your 10,000th go round. I don't know. It is equally possible for either one of those things. It is possible that you only get the one round. I don't think so. I have my own reasons for that. We talked about them extensively. There's a lot of people who do believe that you will come back and you will be in this flesh suit again in a couple of years or a couple of decades or a couple of centuries, however it happens to time out. That people have been waiting to come back into this flesh suit. I don't believe that. I believe more along the lines of this, that there are, yes, you are probably a priest king, right? And now you have control of your destiny now. You don't have to have been a priest king to take control of your destiny now, though. You could be here for the first time and recognize and realize and go and do. I think we might have touched on all of that. If there are more questions, y'all let me know. I'm trying my best to be as plain as possible in this. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a couple of pretty serious, delicate topics. I don't believe that anything that I've said here can be taken in the wrong way, but it is highly, highly recommended that you check out the Infinite Integrations playlist, where I'd go through in a progressional order how to attack these things. I did that in that manner for a reason. We're at a different point now, right? I assume that if you're watching my videos, that you have taken levels of responsibility, that you understand the things that I am talking about, that you are actively practicing the things that I am talking about. It is highly, highly recommended that you do not try to force things. Trying to force things will have karmic repercussions. Some of those might be economic, but karmic repercussions, and you don't want to deal with that, I promise you. Take your time. Do it the correct way. Make sure that you have mastery of one level before you start another level. There's no point in trying to force it. It will come to you. You will be able to do it. It is simply a matter of will. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. If you agree or if you disagree, as long as it stays respectful, I let it stay up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.